What's up? What's up? Good afternoon. I just learned today that 5 p.m. is still afternoon, and apparently after 6 is good evening. Literally learned that like 20 minutes ago. So shout out to Denise, our producer. I'm Shannon Hughes, your host for today, and your host always for the See Us podcast, brought to you by the Narrative Justice. As always, before we start the show, we give honor and respect to Leroy Powell. If you're unaware of Leroy was 15 years old in 2014. He was a witness to an attempted murder turned infanticide. In his witness statement was played on the 11 o'clock news. The news were there for the preliminary hearing or whatnot. And they decided that they wanted to play this 15-year-old child giving statement on an active murder investigation on the news. Immediately, he and his mother were receiving death threats. And several days later, Leroy unfortunately lost his life. Make no mistake, that was absolutely the fault of our local media, which is why it's super important that we're always holding local media accountable for how they show up in our communities and how they represent our community specifically. Like, narrative is so super powerful. It is so powerful. There is real power in your voices. So always make sure that you are telling your voice. Don't let anyone tell your story, your narrative for you. As a reminder, as I say every week, it only takes about 25% of the community for change to occur. Only takes 25%. So if you're thinking about the city of Pittsburgh is only about 310,000 people, give or take, right? So 25% of that is not a lot. It's not a lot of people. So if you have something that you feel called to move forward on, to fight for, don't feel like you need everybody on your side to move forward. You absolutely do not. Move forward. If something is calling you to move forward on, if something that doesn't seem right to you, make sure that you follow through with it. You have no idea the impact that you will have as an individual on everyone else's lives. And if that's not so appropriate for not only today's show, but the last few shows that we've had focusing on the Homewood Water Crisis, I want to give a quick shout out to Miss Tanya McClendon Todd. She is the elderly Black woman, resident of Homewood, minding her own business, but she is the reason why we're here today. Like, this has been going on for 5 years, and it's been Miss Tanya fighting, not only for herself, but for her neighbors, her residents, just to have clean water, sewage not pumped into their basements, to be treated like basic human beings, like we all deserve. If it wasn't for Miss Tanya, just, not letting up, reaching out to whomever she could reach out to, we would not be here today. So don't ever think that your voice is ever too small. It's definitely not. So today, we'll be focusing on the Homewood Water Crisis. I am going to introduce the folks we have on today. The people we have today are some neighbors, residents, concerned citizens who attended the public hearing that happened last Thursday with regards to the water crisis. There was a press conference that happened like the week before, I want to say, down at PWSA. And a public hearing took place this past Thursday. So the folks we have on today are folks who attended, and they're going to give their reaction to all of that. As a quick reminder, before we get into that, right now, especially as the moratorium is lifting, the Wellness Collective is helping with the rent relief effort in Allegheny County. So if you are a person who is struggling with paying your rent or utilities, you can go on covidrentrelief.alleghenycounty.us. Or you can drop in at there's a bunch of drop-in centers around the county, but we're running specifically one in McKeesport. That's 337 Fifth Avenue, McKeesport, PA 15132. Open Monday through Friday, 10 to 6 on most days. Thursday is 12 to 8. So, if you need help with your application, need access to the internet, just want to do your application with other people, feel free to drop by and check us out. We also have a food pantry and also a closet with free clothes and other household essentials. We have some really dope things that everything is free. So feel free to just drop by if you want to donate to the food pantry or the closet. You can do that if you would like to receive from either of those things. Feel free to do that as well. All right, did all of that. So the first person I would like to bring up is Miss Natisha Washington.
Hello.
Hey, Tish, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem at all.
All right. So, can you tell us what is your connection to Homewood?
So I'm from Wilkinsburg, but my family is from Homewood. And for not the past 3 years, but when I was working at OBB, I worked there for 3 years, dealing with environmental issues, mainly in Homewood. So I've gotten to know a lot about Homewood and all the issues that are happening in Homewood.
Word up, word up. And so you attended the public hearing last week, correct?
Yes.
What brought you out? What got you out of your house and into Baptist Temple Church last Thursday?
Yeah, what got me there was, I've been doing work around this issue for so long, and it's been an issue that's been a constant thing in my work since I started at OBB. And so many things have been like up and down, like some things were getting fixed, but other things weren't. And it's just been a constant issue that I've been a part of for so long. And I had to share, what I know, hear what is going on and updated in this issue with PWSA, have some small conversation with PWSA on things that I've heard from residents. That's an issue around the neighborhood. I just really wanted to speak on behalf of the knowledge that I had and the residents that I spoke to, and make sure that they knew the concerns that were happening and the consistent issues that are still happening even with these lead line replacements. So I knew if I didn't show up, nobody would be able to speak for these people and know what was going on and what's been going on from all the information that I've gathered from people calling, putting in 311 requests, and just complaining about flooded basements. And it's just been part of my life for so long. I had to come out and share what I know.
Word up, word up. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciated what you had to say. So I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation. All right, next I want to bring up Miss Judy Ginyard.
Hi,
Hey, Miss Judy, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Cannot complain, cannot complain. So what is your relationship to Homewood?
Well, I was born and raised in Homewood. I went to Baxter Elementary School, and from Baxter Elementary School, I went to Pittsburgh Public School, Westinghouse High School. Other than that, I have worked in the community for since 1998, I want to say, maybe even slightly before then. I was the former executive director of the Lincoln Lorimer Community Development Corporation for almost 10 years. In addition to that, I ran for city council 4 times. And I'm just a concerned citizen of the community in which I was raised, in which I raised my family in, regarding what the issues are. In addition to all of that, I sit on several different boards of different organizations. Currently, I sit on the board of directors of the Primary Care Health Services, with Ellery and the other 8 facilities that we have, and been a board member there for quite some time. I'm also a real estate broker. I am the owner of JKG Real Estate Services, and I've been a licensed real estate professional in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for 29 years. So when I'm out in the community talking to people, people have a tendency to come and bring me issues that concern real estate matters, community matters, and I feel that it's a responsibility for me that since I'm able to be engaged in the community and try to help wherever my expertise lies.
Word up, word up. Well, thank you so much for joining us Thursday and also for joining us today. All right, last person I want to bring in for this conversation, Will Anderson. What's going on, Will? How are you? You're muted, Will.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. As I was saying, my name is William Anderson. I'm a lifelong resident of the Homewood Western community, and I'm a lifetime member of Baptist Temple Church. So I got involved because I heard the concerns of our members of our church. And basically, I'm also the chair of the Allegheny County Democratic Black Caucus. So when I heard residents were getting the runaround and that, they weren't getting the services that they needed and deserved in our community, then I only felt, obligated to stand beside our community members to make sure that they get the representation that they need and to show up as both and represents and helps to elect elected officials, to let them know that our vote matters and that we're not just here to help you get elected, that we expect you, once you are in the office, to be accountable and basically be attentive to the needs of the community. So my involvement is to purely to, as I said at the meeting, to demand that these things are done and that our elected officials who are in office, do what they can and do what they say to help our community.
Word up. Word up. Thank you so much for coming out Thursday, and also thank you for taking the time to come on the show today. Super important, right? Like the crumbling infrastructure is no small thing. It's not a laughing matter. And the fact that, as I was saying earlier, the fact that, the majority of us are just finding out about it now is wild. Like, that is absolutely wild. So I appreciate, you all, whatever it is that pulled you to come out to the, not only the public hearing, but sharing, like, the flyers and sharing the information with the folks that like it was a pretty decent showing out, and hopefully that continues to go, right, because it's people that moves policy, not the other way around. So it's, it truly is the power in the people. So my first, so I'm curious about, like, what your overall thoughts were of, like, how the hearing went, and what you felt about, like, the responses of the invited guests, namely the elected officials, their staff people, and the staff people from PWSA. Natisha, I'm thinking about you, if you don't mind us, responding first.
Yeah. So overall, I thought it was a great event. I thought a lot of people shared some, really personal and brave stories that I think needed to be heard and understood. When I go to a lot of public hearings, it's those stories that people share that really change the minds of a lot of people, because, it's one thing to kind of know it's happening. It's another thing to, like, see it and hear it from the people that are being affected. So that is always, like, a thing that I'm really happy about. As far as the people that were invited, I was glad that they came. One, again, I do wish that Alcosan was there, because I heard a lot of sewage issues, and I was like, they really need to be here to hear this stuff that's going on, because a lot of people, don't know that they're on the same bill, but they're two separate facilities. So when you're talking about PWSA, they're focused on the water issues, but they're not focused on sewage, because that's Alcosan's job. I heard a lot of, we're trying, and, we've been trying, and we're going to try some more. And I think a lot of people there needed some guarantee that something was going to happen. I hope that when they do send in their paperwork, that somebody comes out that next day and does something about their issue, because a lot of times people come and they say, we'll do this, we'll take your information, we'll take your number, and then weeks, months, years go by and nothing happens. So I'm hoping for more urgency, and I'm hoping that people stick to the words of what they said when they came out here and talked to the people, and that they continue to do something. So, it sounds good. I'm a big action person. So I'm hoping that the action follows up with the promises that were made.
Word up, word up. Bill, Judy, what are your thoughts?
I had made it a point to put this on my calendar to attend this meeting. Anytime that we can be in the audience of our elected officials and our government authorities to talk about the issues that affect us in the community, not only as taxpayers, but as property owners and as residents, then I try to attend those meetings. I was very disappointed that not more of the representative, the elected officials, were in attendance. When I read the notice, it was a call, in my opinion, to action. So that meant that I wanted to see the council representative sitting there. I wanted to see the state rep. I wanted to see the mayor's office, some representative from Alcason and the Water Authority, and then anyone else that had any direct assistance with providing relief or even knowing what these residents should do. We needed to have attorneys on board, counselors, all of that. And when you have a call to action, then we need to have everyone that's affected, that has a position or representation to be involved. And I was so saddened that the only elected official that came out was the state rep. I did see that one committee member from the 13th ward came out, but I didn't see, and oh, I'm sorry, former state representative Joe Preston was in attendance as well. So I just wanted to see more of the current administration out. And there also was a representative, please let me be remiss if I don't mention it, that was from State Senator Jay Costa's office. Martell was in attendance too, and I want to thank his office for showing up to participate.
Yes, yeah, it was glaringly evident. Glaringly is my word today. Of who was not there. You know, as you had mentioned, Ms. Judy, it was just Martell was there from Costa's office, Ed Gainey and Melvin Hubbard-Ill was there, state representative. John Welsh was there. I didn't know Joe Preston was there, but he was former. And that was it for as far as elected officials. Peduto RSVP, from my knowledge, and did not show, didn't send anybody either. Fitzgerald, Rich Fitzgerald, county exec, didn't show or respond. Ricky Burgess never responded, which is not uncommon for him. Penn Joint Water didn't even, yeah, they're just pretty much like whatever. Yeah, so it was a small showing from our elected officials for sure. I thought it was, you know, like I was glad PWSA, their head person, Will Pickering, did show up. I felt that to be important, but it was very evident who was there and who was not. Jumping back to what you said, Titch, and I'll take a step back. I just want to point out that before the event, the public hearing started for the community, there was a community walkthrough for the elected officials so that they can actually walk through the homes so that they can see in person what folks have been dealing with. And there were only, I think, like 2 folks that attended that, right? And so, like, yeah, so it makes it very clear, like, how people's lives are being valued, because this is not a small issue. But I'll step back. Will, what were your thoughts? What's your overall feelings?
Well, it was, you know, like I said, it was embarrassing for a community, the lack of attendance and the lack of knowledge and showing up with answers ready to solve the problem by our elected officials, who just continuously put us off on the back burner and just say to us, oh, I tried, or there's nothing I can do about it. When, you know, if you're white, politics are connected in every level. If you're the dog catcher, you're connected somehow, senator or something like that. And when you have a problem, you know how to get it solved, because that's your next door neighbor, and that's a person that cannot avoid you because it's part of the community. You know, and as we continue to have leaders that are disconnected from our community, these problems persist, because they can come into our community around election time, throwing around a couple pennies, get the black slavers to come out and tell us who to vote for, and then they go back into the winds and they have some other aspirations that doesn't include the progress of our community, and they have not completed the first promise, but continue delivering promises to us. So when I was at the meeting, and one thing that I said, you know, I make demands, right? My grandmother was the first African-American elected to the Democratic National Committee, the senior member of the Democratic National Committee. My great-grandmother was one of the first business owners in Homewood, and my grandfather was the first African-American executive executive director to the Black Business, the Homewood Business Association. So I have the history, both current and the past, to connect the dots and see that the lack of leadership that we have, basically inherited by our own, I would just say, complacency with elected official and with politics. So when we have problems like this and it's time for the officials to come out, and it's not, it's July, everybody's on vacation, it's not a priority or anything like that because it's not close to election, then our community is left behind. So things that we have to do, follow up, have to be persistent on what we are asking. And we have to all have the same ask, right? We can't ask one person for 20 different solutions to a problem that they don't really care about. So as we were there, I asked the one guy, Will, whatever, I can't remember his last name, but the guy from PWSA, that's why I asked them, demanded to them that, we need timelines, we need an update of what you have done since it's been 2 weeks since the press conference. So you need to update the community on what you have done since you found out what demands and what the problems were, right? Then we need a timeline on to what you want to do from this point forward. Once you have heard directly from the community, one, and you have seen for yourself with your own eyes what the problem is. Yes, you can say you're new, but that's not an excuse for leadership, right? There's no excuse for you to say, I just got here, things like that, because you shouldn't have taken the position if you aren't prepared to do the job. So I saw a lot of the same old fluff and things like that, and demanded a timeline, and basically he gave them a timeline and all the contact information. So now it is our job, and I guess more so, my job in the position that I'm in, to hold them accountable and to follow up, to make sure that they do what they say, make sure they are in contact with these residents, and that this problem gets solved yesterday, because it started yesterday. So you need to go back and do the problem, and there needs to be a collective, all governmental entities, and no elected official can say there's nothing they can do. And if that's the case, you don't need to be, in office. So.
Yeah. Ooh, mouthful. Mouthful. You're absolutely, yeah. I can't say I don't agree with everything that all of y'all has said. So a couple of things stick out to me. Will, you saying like white folks, like their systems are connected, where ours feel to be very disjointed, or at least the system seems to be disjointed when it comes to Black and brown community, right? This idea of like, well, I tried, that's it. Like that's all I have, and it's like that doesn't make any sense. Actually, what was interesting at the end of the meeting, I was speaking to Will Pickering from PWSA, and I was like, you are in like this fantastically unique position where you can do a lot of good. This infrastructure issue was an issue before you got here. It was probably an issue before you were born. But you're in this position. Like, how great is that? Like, how lucky are you? And his response, which I found was a little strange, was like, well, we'll do what we can, and if we hit a wall, then we hit a wall. And I was like, hit a wall? How? It's the system, dude. Like, if you hit a wall, then Alcosan could pick up, the city could pick up, Penn Water could pick up, like the community could pick up. We all in this together, right? Ain't that Pittsburgh's thing? We in this together or whatnot, decals and such. But anyway, so I found that to be an interesting response at the end of like what I thought was a really powerful, display of realness for them. Because as we know, like they don't have to live like that, like, so Letitia, so the reason why Alcosan wasn't there, or I can't say the reason that they weren't, but the reason why they weren't invited is like, honestly, it didn't cross my mind personally. I'm not sure whether the residents were on it, but they certainly didn't cross my mind for some reason. Just didn't occur to me. But I think it was you who also pointed out, and correct me if I'm wrong, pointed out that the president of Alcosan, of their board, I think, or something, is Sylvia Wilson. Was that you? Okay, I might have learned about that directly after the fact. But apparently Sylvia Wilson, who was just reelected as the board member, school board member, what district is that? Because the districts confuse me. Is it 1? Y'all are all on mute. So I kind of feel like I'm talking to myself right now.
because I know that Carlos was running against her. So was it one that he was running for? I believe that's what it is.
Yeah, I believe it's one. And Sylvia Wilson was the incumbent, and won again. And it's really, really interesting that Sylvia Wilson, who was and still is the school board representative, is also like I believe the president of Alcosan, the the people who handle our sewage, and the school board district that she represents is Homewood, who has this massive infrastructure issue. Insane. So, Will, thinking about you when you're saying like these things are connected, like boom, like the school board. Yeah, like that was wild to me. I'm sorry, Will, were you saying something?
Okay, so and she is the Democratic National Committee woman and the committee person, and she's the 12th ward leader. And she's the person that when my grandmother passed away, they appointed to her Democratic National Committee seat. So she is the state committee member for our senatorial district. She is the former vice chair of the PFT. She is the head of Alcosan. She is the head of the Allegheny County Labor Council. She is the Democratic National Committee person. She is the 12th ward leader in the 12th ward, and she is the 12th ward committee person. And the 12th ward starts at Mertland and stretches all the way to Lorimer. And she holds all of these positions, elected, appointed positions herself, and represents, as most of our African American elected officials do, the worst community, not just in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, but in the entire world, which encompasses our legislative district and our school district.
Yikes.
So we have the most polluted air, right? We have the most polluted water, we have the most polluted soil, we have the worst educational. So we incarcerate more African American men than anywhere else in America, which America incarcerates more African American men than anywhere else in the world, which makes us, where I'm sitting right now in Homewood, the largest incarcerator of African American men in the entire world, in our district, where I'm sitting right now in Homewood. And it's all controlled by Democrats.
Yikes.
We don't have a single Republican representative, not for 85 years in our district. Have I believe Pittsburgh's like 80th worst school district in Pennsylvania. And they want to consolidate with Wilkinsburg, which is the other largest African American city, populated city in Pennsylvania.
Seems like we should be calling her to the next meeting.
Oh yeah. Oh, first of all, when I learned, when you had mentioned Alcosan, I was like, oh yeah. And it was Nyesha Johnson. Shout out to Nyesha. She was the one that brought it to my attention that Sylvia Wilson was the president of Alcosan. So she was already on the roster, but now I'm learning again that she's now like in all of these really powerful positions. This one person who hasn't bothered to even be present in something as big as like the ground falling in on the water structure. That is insane. Like that's wild. That is absolutely wild to me. Yeah, that's wild. So yes, Sylvia, definitely look out for your invite and other things, because it seems like you are at least embedded in the problem. I ain't gonna say you are the problem, but you're definitely kind of linked to it, in bed with it. All right, so you all felt, I heard, it was great for folks to see directly how folks are being impacted by the water crisis. That was great. Not feeling the love and support from our elected officials, as they, largely did not show up. Where do y'all see, like after this public hearing, what do y'all see happening moving forward? Like, you feel like there's, interest in our elected officials or PWSA, Penn Joint Water, et cetera, and really being hands-on? Like, do you think it's possible that there will be some changes being made now that, this conversation has been had?
I think that it definitely showed them the message that, we're not going to stop on this, and that, now we have more eyes on it. So we have people that did come out. So people know now that, we're going to persist on this and we're going to keep following up and continuing this. So I think they at least know, like, this isn't going to stop. And if you don't do anything about it, it's going to keep on continuing. And we're just going to keep on grabbing more people and having more voices out there. And they should deal with it now before more people start voicing their opinions and there's more coverage on it, because it doesn't just stop at this. And them as elected officials should know that, because, it happens during campaigning all the time. If a small issue is present and people get aware of it and it starts showing up everywhere, then it becomes a bigger issue on your leadership than, when you were originally hearing from the community and like, I'll get to it. Now it's a bigger issue and now you got to get to it immediately. So instead of doing that and, wasting a whole bunch of energy, deal with it now, work on it, make it better over time, instead of like waiting for it to get really bad. And then you have to like rush to get things together. So I would hope, and I have the hope that hopefully they know that, if this isn't dealt with, that is going to be an issue. But, we've seen how things gone. So it is a hopeful thing, but that's what I believe can happen, especially if we get more people and have more people come out to these things, trying to get more media press around it, get writers around it. Because once it shows up in a newspaper, then more people are like, what's going on? Why aren't they doing this? And people are trying to hold people accountable right now. So this is a dire time for them to deal with these issues. So that's what I think is going to happen further along, because I don't think any of us are going to stop this battle. So that is my thoughts.
Word up, Miss Judy, you're muted.
So my thing is this. First of all, this issue has been going on for 4 years. And admittedly, when we were there in the meeting, State Rep Gainey's office, Melvin Ill got on the podium and said that he's seen emails, phone calls. He's known of 311 reports that centered around this issue. This issue is an embarrassment to all elected officials that represent that district, starting from the committee person, the ward chairs, the ward officers, the elected officials, the city officials, the state officials, the county officials. This is a major embarrassment, because it is a blatant show that our city services are not availed to our community residents. These community residents pay property taxes, probably real income taxes. They pay water rates. They pay electrical rates, utilities for utility service. And as them being residents of the city of Pittsburgh, they should have been guaranteed that the services that the city has to offer to the taxpayers, to the voters, and to the residents are there, and they should be received. That's the first thing. Second thing was, not one elected official that was there, and there was only one, stood up and said to the residents, I am sorry. I am sorry that this has happened to you, and that from my office, I have been neglectful. Now they have to own this. They chose to run for these positions. They chose to be in these offices. They fought hard to get to get elected. And they've made promises that they have no intentions of keeping. This is deplorable that in this day and age, a community resident has to go through 4 years of having raw sewage in their basements, that they have to lose the senses of smell and taste, that this had to be a health hazard for them. But this is the same community that are city council representative received $94,200 from the housing authority for 3 parcels of land down by Hamilton Avenue that weren't worth $33,000 per parcel. And that money has never been accounted for, and we don't know what happened to that money. And those parcels were sold back to have the properties put down on Hamilton Avenue on top of the failing infrastructure. These are the same elected officials who are currently under investigation for misappropriation of finances and campaign funds. You know, it's really sad that we have corrupt politicians in our midst and that our community residents have to suffer. 365 days times 4 years. That's a lot of time to have this situation. This was never, not one city resident's fault that this happened. From what my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a sinkhole or some kind of natural disaster with a piece of the sewage system, and that PWSA or Alphason or a combination of both came in and made that necessary repair. However, in making that necessary repair, it was a catastrophe that happened to the other residents that caused them to lose this source, to have the source system collapse on it. Now, the source system is already a couple thousand years old. So with that being said, we wouldn't suspect that something would happen to another piece of property because of something happening to another piece. And what the residents were told from what I read in the news was that because it didn't go past the curb, it was a private issue. It was never a private issue. And the elected official should have stood up and said to the authorities, this is not a private issue. The cause and effect of this issue was when the failure happened on the initial pipes that caused the backups to the other residents. Now, in the interim from that, we've had 2, maybe 3 elections. Will, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But in your promises to the community, elect me, I'll set you free, elect me, and all your troubles will end. Not nearly one person who knew about this situation came forth and said to anybody that we have community residents, not 1, not 2, but according to this document, 6 or 8 families that are immediately affected by this situation. And then how in the world did we expect these family members or these residents to be able to afford to have this issue fixed? That was really no fault of their own. So when we come back and say, well, we've had excuses, and I've understood from community residents in speaking to them and hearing from other people that have spoke to them, oh, they were told by their elected officials, well, just you all get together a meeting and I'll come. And come and do what? What resource are you bringing? If it's a policy that needs to be changed, then where's our county council representative? Where are all these representatives that can say, well, this is the problem that affects our constituents, that affects our community residents, that affects our voters, that affects our property owners, that affects the sources of the income that come into the city from the taxpayers. We have to correct this somehow. But no, this one ignored. And so that's the painful part of it is that I can't excuse the ignorance of ignoring a situation that affects the community residents in their quality of life. The city services that the community residents were guaranteed to have was clean, safe drinking water, usable sewer system that would enhance the quality of their life, not destroy it. So, and then come back and tell them, well, this bureaucratic BS, and that's exactly what it is bureaucratic BS, telling them, well, we'll look into this and we'll look into that. Now, how long do it take to look into this? 4 years. So it wasn't until this issue was actually brought to light by the residents and the interference or the assistance of one politician, Tony Marana, Now, I'm not saying, and trust me, by no means, I'm not telling anybody who they should and shouldn't vote for. That's a private, personal matter. However, you can't sit here and get mad at an individual that comes in to offer help and then actually brings the help that the elected officials are supposed to provide. How do you say that you get mad at this lady for not wanting to live one more day, one more hour, one more minute with raw sewage in her house and has reached out to everybody to no avail? And then now here comes somebody that's going to come into the community and get the problem resolved within a week or two. And then you have an attitude about that?
Ms. Judy, I wanna pause right there because I want to get to that sort of like what does reconciliation look like for this infrastructure, this systemic issue, right? And there was like some movement in community with the help of Tony Moreno and some other folks. But Will, did you have any thoughts on what it looks like moving forward? Like, where do we go from here?
Well, I would just say, Judy pretty much covered, most of it. The only thing that I would add to what she had to say was, we have to be vigilant. And like I told them, you have 2 weeks, and we're not going to wait on this issue, and I'm not a passive politician. I'm not a passive sit back, wait. You all know me for the most part. I'm a demanding, we need this done now. You know what I mean? I'm not going to march on the streets and be silent in the boardrooms. It doesn't make any sense for us to have all that talk and all that mouth. We're on the street, want to give great loud speeches, and then when we get in front of the people that are the problem or have the solutions to our problems, we remain and we put our tail in between our legs and we run away. So I don't rate in that way. So as I told you, we will run up. And as I told you earlier, I've had a conversation with other leaders with this issue. So they'll be like I promised him, he'll be getting letters from me as the chair of the Allegheny County Democratic Black Caucus about this issue. It'll be letters from Tim Stevens as the chair of the BPEP or Black Political Empowerment Project. And all of our partners who we will collaboratively make sure that this issue is immediately addressed. We don't have any time to wait. Like I said, this isn't anything new. This is a new problem that I basically, really got engaged with and found out about. But to hear, like she said, that our elected officials have known about this for all this time and have done nothing and had the audacity to show up and say, there's nothing that I can do. I am the highest elected official just about in your district, and there's nothing that I can do, and I don't have any bully pulpit or any power to help you from an entity that as legislature I control, which is just hypocritical and is just outrageous. So these things are just very offensive to me because I'm so engaged with politics, know how real politics work, how things actually get done. As I said, I am very encouraged, by, you being involved, Shannon, all of you all being collectively involved in the things that you've done to make this a hot button issue and an upfront issue and something that is no longer in the shadows. And that's what it takes. It takes a collective, fight and a collective push, because a lot of times when I'm fighting for these things, it looks like I'm the angry black man, right? It's just me. It's Will. Oh, that's Will. Will's upset about it. Will got something stuck in this sewer and he's complaining. So I just want to, continue to fight and to continue to collectively push together forward.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, I feel for everything that all of y'all have said. So I want to jump back to Ms. Judy. You started to touch on like the community's response to this issue, right? Yeah, and so like though, like like our elected officials are absolutely accountable for all of this, right? Just as much as PWSA is, Alcosan is, Penn Joint Water is accountable for this issue. But they don't move unless we move them, and that's just what it is. And it really, to me, and this is my personal feelings, like I don't care who's sitting in those seats, the system itself is corrupt. It's really hard to be the not corrupt person in a corrupt system, because like it's really hard to move differently than your peers are, unless you're being pushed by the community. And so I tend to put my focus on like what the community is doing. And I'm trying to find my words. So basically, like I'd rather galvanize, organize our people so that our people can come to the doorsteps of the state rep, the senators, the mayors, the committee people, the whoever else, and tell them this is what you're going to do because you're here to represent us, not the other way around. Like the people move policy, not the other way around. But to do that, we have to be organized. And I think, as Will had just said, like we all, or it was the Will and Natisha saying that like we all have to be saying the same thing at the same time, not going with 17 different things in 17 different directions. I think that's what makes it difficult for us to move things forward. So I'm thinking about, because quite honestly, the public hearing was super powerful. It was necessary. It brought a lot of people together. It brought a lot of enlightenment of what's going on, not only for the attendees, the residents, but also for the elected officials in the room. But we've been down this road a lot, in of so many different ways. We've been down this road, and so I'm more, like just preparing for like, okay, so what are we going to do to move this forward? Because what I'm not going to do is beg some people who could have done something a long time ago to do something that they could have done on their own a long time ago. Like with all the hopes in the world, like, look, if you're willing to roll your sleeves up, like if it's like, okay, this is where we stop, this is where we get on board, like what are we going to do collectively? Cool, bet. Like that makes everybody's world so much easier. But if not, if we're going the ways that we always go, then what can we do as a collective community, right? Like, what can we do? How can we pour in and support each other? How can we build up our infrastructure as far as like how we're going to push the powers that be to do what they're supposed to do? And so that's where my mind is. Miss Judy, I see your mouth moving. You saying something?
So the first thing that we have to do is first recognize where the problem came from. The problem came from the work that the authority was doing in the community. All right. Now, as a habit, what the community has to do in standing beside its own residents, and although we shouldn't have to, the community has to vote these people out of office. That's what you have to do. You have to be conscious enough to put people in office that actually care about what's going on in the community and who's willing and ready to roll up their sleeves, get involved, and do the work that needs to be done in order to address the issues and the concerns. When we have a tree that falls down in our community, you get a visit from the building code enforcer that gives you a violation that tells you will haul you into housing court or magistrate court to correct any building violations, tall grass, trees falling down, cracks in sidewalks. So the authorities, the city, the local government is holding the taxpayer, the property owner, accountable for the condition of the property that stands outside of code. However, these are not the same people that can hold their own selves accountable for when they make a mistake, when they cause a situation to occur. And then the elected officials from the various offices don't hold each other accountable. It shouldn't have been not one person that did not represent that district, the area, the neighborhood, the community, the street, anything, the ward, anything should have been at that meeting to show the residents that are affected and the ones that are in the immediate area that we all actually do care. When we have had enough of these excuses, and we have had enough of, oh, well, you can't get mad at our one politician because everybody loves him, but he ain't did nothing. So, I mean, you can love him all you want, but if you didn't do your job, if you didn't do what you are charged to do, if you didn't make it happen, and then you don't have the audacity to humble yourself to say, I'm sorry. Okay, I messed up. Own it. Okay, don't sit there and say, well, and we're going to try to work it out in the future. We don't have the luxury of try. We have the luxury of doing, because that's what you're down there. That's what you're in that position to do. So how in the world can you sit and look at the community resident today and tell them we're going to try our best to do something? Oh, but by the way, on November the 2nd, don't forget to vote for me. We can't do that. That can no longer be a common agenda. This is a public health crisis in this community. And I don't care where the money comes from, who brings it in, but everybody should be sitting around a table right now, today, like we are, and say to each other, what can we do to fix it? But we spend so much time. What I heard in that meeting was everybody passing the buck, and I'm new. And okay, well, you know what? When you came in on board new for PWSA, you inherited everything. You were the one that stood in front of whomever you were in front of and said, I can do the job. Jump in and get the job done. All right. The authorities work with the elected officials. So unfortunately, there is no room for excuses. And this is what we have to get tired of. We have to get tired of, we're going to fight for the people. Well, who is we and what are you fighting for? Because we have an issue right here that you could have used as an example. You could have said, look, this is an issue that directed a constituent, a taxpayer, a voter, a property owner in the city of Pittsburgh, Homewood, particularly Ray Street. And this is how we resolve it. You can show me a whole lot better than you can tell me, because while you're showing it, you're doing the actions of the job. So what do we have to do? We have to mobilize together and stay on these elected officials and hold them accountable and quit giving them passes for this insufficient answers, for this let me patronize you with a response that doesn't have any teeth or muscle behind the response. The $75,000 that a Homewood business, Cicerone, and I'm pronouncing the name wrong because I don't know how to pronounce it, plumbing company down there on Kelly Street that came and volunteered to correct this issue, they need to be complimented on that. But they also should be compensated, because guess what? This issue didn't have to take this long to even get a half an ounce of resolve. It shouldn't have took this long. It should have been done 4 years ago in 2017, and we shouldn't be just talking about it as an issue in 21. In 21, we should have said in 2017 we had a problem, and this is how this problem was solved in 2021, so that if this problem comes again, now we have a precedent. This is how it is. But let me just touch on one more thing that we haven't had an opportunity to touch on, and that is the devaluation of our property values. When you come in to take our properties, you want to devalue our properties. That this situation, even if these residents, these property owners wanted to sell these properties, do you know how difficult it would be to sell a piece of property when you fill out a seller disclosure and you disclose that you had raw sewage issues for 4 years coming straight into the house? Are there structural engineer reports? Are there environmental reports done? Are there health reports done? I mean, this is a lot to say to somebody. We heard about your issue, we received your email, and we got your phone calls, but you did nothing. You didn't do anything. And so you can't point the finger at the constituents. You can't point the fingers at the property owners. You have to point that finger back at yourself and say, I failed my community because I didn't make sure that something was done. And then community, you got to stop sending these same people back in office to fail you, because they're already showing you what they are doing. They're not showing up to hear your concerns. They're not addressing your problems. They don't have any resolutions for your situations. And then on top of that, they can't even tell you how sorry they are that this has happened to you on their watch. So we have a whole lot of problems that we have to address, and we have to stop getting mad at other people who come in with good intentions to do the work to help where our own elected officials have failed. And you can't change that fact. There's no way to sugarcoat it. There's no way to colorfully describe it. It was a complete failure. Own it. Because we can see it. I'm not stupid, naive, ignorant, or dumb that I cannot see that this issue was a direct result of negligence by the local government, and it was their responsibility collectively to fix this. Because the day before that hole was opened up, those families had running water, clean running water, hot water. Raw sewage was leaving it as it was supposed to have happened. And now they have to live through 4 winters, through 4 summers, 4 falls, and 4 springs in this type of conditions. And can't nobody say, I'm sorry? Can't nobody come together and say, hey, we have a problem that we must solve. But you could be out there handing out book bags, turkeys, this and that, taking selfies with people and pictures and not showing up. And I want to be reelected to do what? So the community, you have to come together too. You have to say no more. We're not going to have people in office that don't have our best interests at heart, but have their wallets in their pockets and their purses and their bank accounts in the best interest of the community. And so now the community.
All right, Miss Judy, I saw Natisha. Were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add that one thing that I know is we have this American Rescue Plan that's supposed to be putting money into infrastructure. And I know there's going to be, they're going to do a presentation of some sorts on the 12th. They're going to do a public hearing in the people Tuesday that are going to city council to make sure that those funds are going to ensure that we have clean water, clean air, that they're fixing our roads, our sidewalks, and that this money isn't just going to come to our city and then it doesn't come to us. So I think in situations like this, where we have these big pots of money that are coming here, I think that we should, as people, make sure that we show up and say, hey, no, we need this to go to our community. We need to make sure that we're spending money here with our infrastructure because we're the ones that need it most right now. I also think that if people aren't going to come to us, that we need to show up to them, show up to their offices, show up to their public meetings, show up to the council meetings, show up to the county meetings, make sure that we're making sure that they hear us too, so they can't say that they didn't. Because a lot of times they're like, oh, well, I didn't make it to that event or I didn't come to that meeting. But if we show up to your meeting and show up to all y'all's meetings, the PWSA board meetings, the Alcosan meetings, and continuously tell y'all this is an issue, this is a problem, and y'all still aren't doing anything, then we have more to say, like, you knew, like there's no excuse. You knew because we were here, we showed up, you didn't have to come to us. So now you don't really have any excuse at all. So then it's like, now we're in a different situation where now you can't like go in the background and be like, well, I didn't know anything. If we continue to show up, if we continue to make sure that we're heard on every level and make sure that when money is coming in, that we're having our voices heard and said, this money needs to come to us so they can't act like they didn't hear us. I think that is a big push because it is a lot of the reasons why a lot of these monies just keep going wherever they go, because the people that show up to these meetings, the people that make these public comments, people that show up to the city council and say, hey, we need this, they're the ones that they can justify and be like, oh, well, they came to us and they spoke to us. So, you know, that's where we prioritize our money. But since we have this gathering and this collective of all these people and all these groups coming together, this is like a prime time where we can get those people and say, here, make that same comment that you made at this meeting, say it here, say it directly to these people who have these decision-making powers, and make sure that they know that this is going on so that when we call them again for something, they can't say, oh, we didn't know. So I think that's a big thing that we can do as people to make sure that this can be more seen and more effective and action can be taken more. You know, ultimately, you know, our politicians are going to do what we do. And I agree with Miss Judy. We need to vote in people that are going to do for us. We also need to make sure that people can't say that they didn't hear us. So we need to show up everywhere.
Absolutely. A couple things on that. We do need to show up, but also it's really important for us to understand accessibility. Folks don't know how to show up. You know, like the public hearings. I mean, COVID was a lot of things, but it put a lot of meetings online, which is a plus, like, you know, the net plus, because otherwise you had to show up on Tuesday. And if you work or in school or got kids or disabled, whatever the thing is, like you can't show up. Like, so your voice is not effectively not being heard. That's, you know, city council, that's school board, that's et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's how all of those things work. They've all been pushed online. And to my knowledge, they're all still running online, but also people would have to know that they are happening. So like making that information accessible. And then absolutely, I agree with Miss Judy as well. It's like we have this jacked up infrastructure because we've had a jacked up system. Historically, like that just is what it is. Like, you know, I mean, Zapala has been our DA for over 20 years, ruining people's lives, right? Like, and he's still there, like ruining people's lives, right? So like, when we have, and you know, in all of these different offices. But what I will stress though, I do feel like whether a person comes in with good intentions or not, accountability is so important. Because a person can walk in with good intention and then be morphed by their peers, right? Like, you know, like being a person inside of a system trying to change the system by yourself just isn't effective. It's not sustainable. So that sustainability comes from accountability, right? That comes from transparency. That comes from the community making sure you do what you're supposed to do. So when we elect in somebody that we like or we believe in, that doesn't mean that, all right, well, we're good. They got it. It's time to sit down. No, it's never time to sit down. Like, you know, like the election cycle is not when we become politically involved. Like that's an all year round thing that does not happen all year round. And again, that accessibility piece, right? Because like who's actually being engaged in this way? Like who's coming to these meetings and these events and like who's being educated? Because it's not all of us. I can tell you that. It's definitely not all of us. And my litmus test is if my family ain't going to be there from one way or another, like if my family won't know about it, if they would not show up to it, if they don't have access to it, like then it ain't accessible as far as I'm concerned. You know, that's always my litmus test. And none of the things that I have access to, my family would not be there. I'm only there because I happen to look, like people think that I'm one type of Black person. I'm not. And then they find out that I'm not, but I'm here already. So anyway, I'm gonna take a step back. Will, did you have any thoughts? What can the community do? What can we do to push things further? Will, as I know you to always say, like, you know, we don't wait for folks to come around the bend. So what can we do collectively to make sure that this isn't the thing that we talk about for the next 10, 20 years? Like this is the thing that we see some results.
Well, you know, like you said, we have to stay constantly engaged. Like they need to just stop calling it primary and general elections. They should just say register, vote, stay engaged year round, right? And that's what one of our themes is. You know, African Americans vote in each and every election, and elected officials, you know, be held accountable to the needs and aspirations of our communities. And this is a constant fight. You don't just, you know, and that's a problem in our community. It's too much hype and we're too, you know, celebratory, right? We want to party, somebody has a party, somebody has a turkey drive, a book bag, and you mistake that for leadership. And that is not leadership. You know, a leader is someone that you can, like a friend and a neighbor that you can contact anytime that you have a problem in any type of issue, whether large or small. And it's up to our community, especially in Pittsburgh. There are too many followers and national followers in Pittsburgh that nothing happens in Pittsburgh unless it happens nationally, right? There are no large marches in Pittsburgh unless there's a national march that Pittsburgh can be a part of, right? So we need to be original in our thought and, you know, intentional. We have to stay engaged. We have to stay on top of our elected officials, have demands, and have follow-up to those demands to make sure that they follow through with what you ask them to. You can call them, you can email them, you know, you can get in touch with them, you can post on their social media. And my thing is we need to be direct here to our elected officials. We march at Steve Zabala's house 3 or 4 times a week. I guarantee within a week he resigns his position, right? If we take our concerns to their communities and our people to their communities, then we open up the act and we start expose others that they don't want to be. So they're saying our problem are minuscule, larger scheme of things, right? We in our community, because we're so, battered, we're so, have such a abusive wife syndrome in our community with that we're protective over our leaders because of the history of the assassination of our leaders and all of these things that happened 60 years ago that are irrelevant today, and it has kept our community, and only our community, 30 years behind. So we have to be intentional. We have to, know who we're voting for, right? We have to get our community and our people as engaged as they do TikTok videos and on Facebook and Instagram and all these things. We have to use these platforms to reach our people, as Shannon said, to get them to our event, right? So when we have events that the is going to come to and feel welcome, that come as you, bring all your concerns, bring with you. And if you ever been to our event, if an elected official is there that you had a problem with, go get them. I'm not there to buffer your feelings as a representative for you, right? I'm there to speak for you as you feel your feelings, right? You can't go repeat all that stuff, although we might want to, but you have to be direct and intentional with your feelings, and don't be so emotional, right? Emotion is good on certain things, but you have to be more factual than emotional. You can bring the emotion with, but start out with your facts and the end that you expect follow up with that result. And if you have any problems, we're always here. Like I said, it's a collaborative thing that we're only going to move this issue together. And I'm on the inside of the party fighting against the most corrupt Democratic Party since old Chicago daily days. And that is a fact in American politics today where we sit. So, only together we will do better. So you got to stand up and fight.
Word up. Word up, word up. So I want to reiterate a few things that I heard before we close up today. One of the things I remember hearing is, Ms. Judy, you had mentioned, our elected officials who were present, not calling out and calling on their peers. And that's always kind of stuck out to me. I'm not sure if that was the intention that you had when you said it, but that is what came to mind is when there are these massive issues, right? These are your peers. Why are you not calling on them and calling them out to show up to these things? Because it is important. Something that stuck out to me, the first elected official that spoke was Reverend John Welsh. And basically he said, I feel for y'all, but there's nothing really that I can do from my position. I'm just a committee person. But it's bruh, you have voice, and a bigger voice than most of us. You're connected, you're the head of the seminary, you're all of these things. You can do that. You can call on your people. You can say, yo, I'm going to this meeting. You should really be there. You're an elected official as well. Same with Ed, same with Costa, same with Ricky could show up, and the rest of them. So that stuck out to me, as you have mentioned. Definitely spoke on what does the community do, as the community shows up and shows out, we've seen over and over and over again, it's the people that saves the people. It's never the systems. So Tony Moreno found out about this through Gabby and Miss Carmen, showed up at Miss Tanya's house and connected with the company, the construction company, $30,000, which is projected to be $75,000, when it's all said and done, to get her house back online. That woman has been without hot water for 4 years. For 4 years, elderly Black woman without hot water. Her grandkids cannot visit her in her home for 4 years. Health issues for 4 years, and it's not just her. But that's one person. That's one person, one company, and it just came together just like that, just off the strength of people understanding and seeing yo, my neighbor is having this issue. Let me do something about it. And it's we've always done that. As people, that's not a problem. You know what I mean? That's historic. We've always done that. So if we can do that, then why can't the people that got the money and the access and the infrastructure and the bulldozers and the whatever else they got, why can't y'all do that? Why can't we each one teach one? Why can't this be a collective process? Which is what I'm personally pushing for, because I do not think that PWSA and them are going to have the answers, because I just don't think they have the capacity, the creativity, honestly. But I do think that people do, and I think people should always lead on what the needs are. I just do. So I do think that there should be a collaborative process. For one thing, there's transparency and accountability, and I just don't trust for systems to be responsible and in charge behind closed doors to do all of these things on their own. I just don't. I think that all things as it relates to politics and infrastructure should be led by people, and approved by people, because otherwise we end up with stuff that probably shouldn't happen. And then I heard accountability in so many different ways. Right. Will, well, I think all of you in your own way saying, like, when there is a problem, no matter who the person is, no matter how likable they are, like, you can love your people and still hold them accountable. In fact, accountability is love. Like, folks, if you know me, you've heard me say that 1,000 times over and over and over again. If I don't care about what you're doing, it's because I don't care about you. So for me to hold you accountable, that is an act of love. And so when our elected officials, whether they family, friends, like, they're likable people, they've been around, they're a part of the community or not, like, if you are not doing, like, holding up your end of the bargain, we should be holding them accountable. That don't mean we don't love you. It don't mean that we don't like you. It means this is what you're here to do. You ain't doing it. Let us help redirect you. Let us help guide, get you back on track, like, because that's what we should be doing. And quite frankly, it's called checks and balances. That's what we're supposed to do with politics and politicians. We're not supposed to sit back once we get somebody in office, like, oh, but they got it. Cool. And then wondering what happened. That's just not supposed to happen. So anyway, so I'll jump back my little rant here. Is there anything else that you all wanted to say before we cut out? I appreciate each and every one of y'all for showing up, not only for showing up today, but showing up last Thursday, because it is important, right? And it is our voices, our eyes, our witnessing that causes change to happen. It's in the background where violence and negligence happens when people don't have their eyes on it. Natisha, I'm gonna start with you.
Yeah. The first thing is, after all the stuff that you said, one of the things that I always say to myself is I also have to hold myself accountable. So when I saw your thing, I saw it, like, I think the day of, and I was like, if I don't go to this, then what am I really saying about my commitment to my community? And I think that everybody who goes into these things, they also have to hold themselves accountable, because it's one thing to be like, oh, something's messed up, and it's another thing to say that and not do anything about it. So I think definitely as community members, I really stress, if you're going to hold other people accountable, you also have to hold yourself accountable. If they're not doing what needs to be done to get your stuff together, do like Miss Tanya, keep going out there, keep talking to people until something happens. And like you said, Shannon, there's real power in that. And I do believe in that wholeheartedly. I think that in these situations, when we have these issues that are so long-term, people get so bogged down about it, and people are just hopeless about it. And people don't come to a lot of these meetings, so they don't know the resources. And I think, us as organizers, us as people in the community, making sure that we go to people and say, here's these resources, here's what's going on. And Shannon, I will forward you whatever I get as far as water issues, because it is our responsibility as people who care about the community and people who work in the community to also be able to share those resources with our community, let them know what's going on. So if they can't make it to a meeting, we make it to a meeting, and then we come back and we're like, this is what's going on, this is what's happening. I know that our elected officials are supposed to, be the person that's supposed to do that. But if we see that our system is lacking, we definitely also have to, put ourselves together to help the people that we know are in need. But also, as everybody else has been saying, hold those people accountable and make sure that we're always on them about what's going on. I think this was a great hearing, and I think this is a great conversation. And I hope that things like this don't die out, because I know how some conversations kind of try to die out. So I'm hopeful that this will be strong and that this will bring upon more allies, because there's so many people in the environmental world that are trying to come together to fight on this issue. Because it's usually, like Will said, it's oh, it's just that organization or it's just that group that's fussing. They're going to say something, but it's whatever. But if we all are coming together and being whether it's an environmental issue, a safety issue, a housing, education issue, if we show up because it affects our whole well-being of life and say no, we're going to make sure that this is getting done, I think that we can have so much power in that. And I'm just so grateful for it right now, because this is a really good movement time. I'm seeing a lot more people getting active, and it just fills my heart with joy, because I remember doing work and people were like, oh, I don't know, they don't never do nothing, they don't never pay attention to us. And now people are really no, you got to do something, or it's going to get real, for lack of better terms. That's kind of how I phrase it in my head, but that's what it is. It's either you get with your job and you do what you needed to do for the community, like you said you were, or people are going to really hold you accountable now. And we live in a world, you know, in social media, online, where like we can spread that message so fast that if you're not being accountable, everybody's going to know. So that's my thoughts on all of this.
Word up. Thank you so much, Natisha. Will, do you have any final thoughts?
You know, okay, it started. I would just, you know, continue hammering, you know, what I've been saying. You know, we have to work together as a community, right? There's no one that's better than anybody else, because to the other communities, none of us are worth anything. And until we start working collectively together, fighting the same battles the same way, in the same direction, you know, we're never going to get anywhere. You know, and as long as we accept token leadership, our community is going to continue to suffer. You know, this community has not improved since the riots, right? And they talk about all these plans to rebuild. How do we rebuild the community? Section 6 work together. Section 4 and 2 work together, separating our community. You know, it's a shell game. And then the money comes in for these studies. These people get paid, and then they're gone, and our community is left in the exact same condition it's in. You know, and that's one thing my grandmother always said, that the community is going backwards instead of going forward. You know, and it's my fight, and that's why I stay here, because I believe in our community and believe that we will, you know, get better together. And I thank you, Shannon, for, you know, continuing to fight. And, you know, I'm in a lot of these rooms and stuff, and we're the, you know, none of us are the ones they thought we were when we show up by the time we leave, you know. Sometimes they're upset that they invite us, but we're there to speak for our people, not to be liked. You know, and that's the one thing that my grandmother always told me. You know, it's better to be respected and to stand up for your community than to be liked and do nothing. So I'm here to fight, and I'm here with all of you, and anybody that, you know, needs help, feel free to reach out to me, because I'm here for the long run.
Word up, word up. Thank you so much, Will. Miss Judy, do you have any final thoughts?
Okay. First, I want to thank everyone here, that especially you, Shannon, the host, and Natish, and help me say it, Natasha.
Natisha,
Natisha. Okay, I got it. I'm sorry, young lady, and Will too. I mean, you know, oftentimes, and Will can attest to that you know, we don't have to be the greatest of friends to have concern and compassion for our community, and we don't have to always agree either on what has to happen, and we don't have to like each other. Right is right and wrong is wrong, and we were all raised to know the difference between the two. And there's no excuse for poor and bad behavior. There's no excuse for letting a community resident suffer for 4 years and then come back and tell them at the end of 4 years that you still don't have an excuse for them. You have nothing that you can help them with. So I mean, when we sit back and say, well, we can have a meeting about this. Well, yeah, we can have a meeting, and we can meet until we have met ourselves out, but then we have to take some real hardcore solid actions. So my suggestion is that within 30 days from the date of that public hearing, anyone that was supposed to furnish a response needs to follow up with having that response follow through it. Because from what I've seen on the news, when certain people got involved in this situation, they didn't have to wait 4 years to come up with a solution. They had that solution resolved within a couple of hours, a couple of days, and then you've seen heavy equipment operators on the case within a week. Those are the kind of people that we need to come into our communities, whether we agree or disagree with them politically or not. But we still need that voice. We still need that assistance coming into the community. And when we have community leaders here, then you know what? You asked for this. You asked for this position. Vote for me and I'll set you free. You asked for this. So if you ask for it, then you got to hold yourself to a higher standard of accountability. I come to these meetings because I'm going to hold you accountable. I don't have nothing to take away from nobody. But whatever I can give, I'm going to give it. And if it needs to be said because people are afraid to say things because they feel that there's some retaliation coming to them, I can say it. I don't have no problem saying it as long as it's right honest, decent, respectful, and the truth. And if I misspeak, I am totally woman enough to come in and say to anybody, I apologize. I gave you some misinformation, or I misspoke, or I need to correct myself. We have to hold other people accountable on those same lines and terms, for not just because of who you are and how popular you may be. This incident should have never happened. And these elected officials should be falling over their feet, apologizing for allowing community residents to suffer like this. And it appalls me. There isn't anything that I can do other than keep speaking up about it, and I won't let it rest, because guess what? It's a shame that our own community residents have to have bricks thrown in at their houses, be taunted by their neighbors' children because they have an issue in their houses, and then the elected officials come in front of your face, sitting in a house of the Lord, and say to you, I'm going to do the best I can. We tired of going. I will or I won't. If I can't, I'll let somebody know I can't, but own it. All right? And apologize for it. Own it and apologize for it, because there's no way in the world. I don't know how anybody could sleep at night knowing that these people were suffering the way that they're suffering and didn't do nothing. And then we always holler and complain when we hear quote unquote outsiders coming into our community doing what you should have done. There's no excuse. And I won't accept one. And I'm tired. And we're not going to tolerate this anymore. So we're going to bring the resources to the residents. Yes, we will.
Yes, Judy, I want to touch on, thank you so much for all of that. And thank all of you for being here. But I want to touch on something you said, like you can't do anything besides, use your voice. That is a big thing. Like, I don't want you to discount the power of your voice, just like none of us, any of us should discount the power of our voices. So like continuing to amplify this issue, continuing to share the podcast, share the information about the water crisis as it, continues to develop, doing the things like Natisha, like, Alcasan's a part of this too. Like that's important information. Like, did you know this was going on? Like, did you know these folks are involved? Like making sure that and not only us, right, but all of us knows what's going on. Because again, there's an accessibility barrier when it comes to these social issues, right? There's the majority of us have absolutely no idea how this has even happened. And that's how the kids in the community are targeting Miss Tanya. They have no idea what's going on. They think Miss Tanya is the problem. She's not. How would they know? How would they know unless we are amplifying these issues? Like we're amplifying each other's voices in our own. So I think that's major. And I thank you for, committing yourself to that. Right. I thank all of you for committing yourselves to being a part of this. And that's continuing to share out this information, making sure people know yo, this is what's going on in Homewood. This is what's going on in Pittsburgh. This is what's going on in Wilkinsburg. This is what's going on in Duquesne in the Mon Valley. Because it's quiet as it's kept. It's all of our issue. This is not a Homewood issue, it's a Pittsburgh issue. And beyond that, it is our collective issue. Ain't nobody having a real good time with their infrastructure if you're Black or brown. And that's just a fact. That is an unfortunate and scary fact. That's a scary fact. So yeah, just want to thank you all again for joining us today. Sharing your thoughts. Thank you for coming out to the meeting, the public hearing, and witnessing all of what took place. Not only the comments from the neighbors who are impacted, but also the responses from the powers that be, the elected officials and PWSA staff people and heads of PWSA, right? Because what I also didn't hear was any sort of plan of moving forward, and that's just a fact. We didn't hear though, okay, this is how we're going to move forward. I think Miss Judy, you had asked, or someone had asked, well, what was the timeline that they gave? And I can't remember if Will Pickering actually responded with okay, this is what this looks like from here. I think he just said okay, we're going to look into it and we'll get back to y'all. And so that was from, Will Pickering, Gainey's office, Costa's office on down. There was nothing really solid that we can grab onto, and everyone else was just missing in action. right? So like that's what the landscape of our elected officials look like for this particular issue, this really, really serious crisis that's going on in Homewood. So keep that in mind. So yeah, so we'll wrap it up today. Again, thank you all for coming out and sharing your voices. Continue to share this out. Share it with your friends, your neighbors, your Snapchat friends, and all the rest of them folks. Thank you all for joining us again for another Sunday of the See Us podcast. Very important information. As you all know, I'll say it again one more time. It only takes about 25% of the community for change to occur. Do not think that your voice is too small. Do not think your voice isn't powerful enough. It only takes a few folks. As a matter of fact, it only takes one of us. So if you feel your voice cracking because you're afraid that you won't be received, let your voice crack and say it anyway. Let your voice crack and say it anyway. Because I am not the one, like, quite frankly, I don't like to be the one. But if I'm the only one, then I'm going to be the one to say it, because Miss Tanya was the only one, you know, and it's because Miss Tanya was the only one for nearly 5 years that we're here today facing this issue. If you are a person with a story to tell, either you've dealt with systemic violence, police brutality, police violence, or something good in community, right, that you think is important for people to know, feel free to reach out to us, 412-453-6309, or you can email me at racialjusticeInmedia@gmail.com and request to be on the show to tell your story. It's your story, you know, no one else's. Don't let anyone else own your story. And with that, that'll be all for me.